In this video, I compare Impasto Medium and Impasto Putty, both made by Natural Pigments. Something that I like about both of these is that neither contains stearates, solvents, dryers, or resins. In fact, both are just made with combinations of ground calcite, silica, barite, and bentonite in linseed oil. The medium is on the left and the putty is on the right. As I remove the lids, you can see there's not much difference in their appearance. The putty might be ever so slightly darker. The instructions on the putty can specifically state to remove the layer of oil on top and then replace it once you've taken out the amount of putty that you want to use. Let's start with the medium. On the left side, I'll do a 2-to-1 ratio of medium to paint, or 66% medium. In the middle, I'll do a 1-to-1 ratio, or 50% medium and 50% paint. And on the right side, I'll do a 1-to-2 ratio, or 33% medium. I'm testing out different proportions of medium because I want to see how the medium interacts with the paint. Like, can I make more dramatic shapes than oil paint on its own? And how will the medium impact the color of the paint? Here's a close-up of the 66% medium mixed with 33% paint. This is foundation white oil paint, by the way, which is a combination of titanium white and lead white. You can see that the texture is pretty similar to oil paint on its own. It's pretty buttery, maybe slightly less buttery than oil paint. It's not sticky or tacky. Let's do the exact same thing with the putty now. We've got 66% putty on the left, 50% putty in the middle, and 33% putty on the right. As I'm mixing the paint with foundation white, I'm not noticing any discernible difference between the putty and the medium. When I do a close-up, you can see the texture is pretty similar to the medium blend as well. It's not sticky or tacky, and it pretty much feels just like oil paint on its own. Now I'm going to test the Impasto Medium with manganese blue hue, and I chose this paint just because it's a semi-transparent paint, and I wanted to see if the Impasto Medium changed the color at all. Let me pause the video for a moment because it might be hard to tell, but the 66% medium blend is in fact lighter than the 33% medium blend. So the medium is definitely tinting the colors. Same thing with the putty now, and I can't tell a difference again between the putty and the medium as far as feel goes, and the color is tinting similarly as the medium as well. Now I'm mixing Impasto Medium with Ivory Black, and the color is also being tinted, so it's more of a dark charcoal on the left side. We see the same thing happening with the putty, so the more medium or putty that's being added, the lighter the color is. For good measure, I'm going to add little piles of the oil paint just on its own next to each of the colors, so we have a baseline to compare. I'm going to hang the canvas vertically to dry because this is how most of us paint. I want to see how well the medium and the putty hold their shape, especially with increasing proportions. Alright, it is 7 days later, and all of the piles have held their shape pretty well compared to the oil paint on its own. This is 66% medium with the foundation white and it's slightly wet. 50% medium is also wet, and 33% medium is still a little wet as well. When I tap the oil paint on its own, it's dry. Now if we go to the putty and tap those piles, the 66% putty is still wet, the 50% putty is still a little wet too, and the 33% putty is also still a little bit wet. Moving on to the manganese blue hue, the 66% medium pile is wet, 50% medium is barely dry, 33% medium is dry. The oil paint on its own is also dry. Moving on to the putty. The 66% putty is dry, 50% putty is dry, and 33% putty is also dry. For the ivory black blends, I should have tested these earlier because they are all dry. And the oil paint on its own is the firmest of all the piles. And the putty is definitely firmer than the medium. So all in all, it took up to 12 days for the medium to dry, and the putty dried faster. It took up to 9 days for each pile to be just touch dry. To be fully dry, these would definitely take months, if not years. You might be wondering why use Impasto Medium or Impasto Putty at all, and the simple answer is cost. So these are both known as extenders. They increase the apparent volume of paint without altering the consistency. When I asked Natural Pigments if there's a cap on how much medium or putty could be added, they responded that there is no practical maximum amount. However, the more you add to the paint, the more transparent the paint becomes, and as we saw, the lighter it becomes. So only use the amount you need to do the task is what they recommended. If you found this video helpful, please give it a like and feel free to ask any questions below.